Joining us is Mike Miller from Pond Pro to talk about how Water Garden is designed. Well, Mike, we're obviously in the middle of a renovation here. Tell me about the components to this design. I'm sure there's some critical pieces.
There are some things that we want to make sure happen whenever we look at a pond. We want to make sure, number one, that there's one place that's lower than the rest of the pond, at least 2.5 to 3 feet deep. That allows us a place to force the fish into if we ever need to catch them. We're going to lower the level of the pond, force the fish down here, and bring them up out of the pond. That's number one. The second reason is we want all the trash that comes down into the pond, and it's going to fall off of these trees. We want it to get down in one place where we can clean it out, so it'll filter down to the bottom. That's the first part, is one part lower than the other. Doesn't have to be very large, but it needs to be large enough that we can get down in it and do what we need to do.
Will the fish overwinter in this part
Yes,
as well?
this is also the part where they're going to get to in the heat of the summer in Oklahoma, and also in the cold of the winter. As their metabolism slows down, they'll move to the bottom, warmer water down there. So that's the first step. Then the next thing we're going to have is a shelf, and you can see here we've put a shelf all the way around, but notice that it's at different heights.
Yeah, we have
this side is lower than this side over here. That's so that we can have different kinds of plants, different types of water plants, and we can move them up as required to go from the lower shelf to an upper shelf to the top shelf, depending on what kind it is. Otherwise, we're asking that plant to send roots or stalks all the way up to the surface, and that's hard for the plant to do.
And this higher shelf lets us introduce a greater diversity of plants as well.
Got lots of different plants that we can put in the margins of the pond and then down into the pond. So some plants like their feet wet, some like their toes wet, some like their ankles wet. So we've got a place for all of them. It also serves as a safety mechanism so that if somebody were to fall in your pond, they could walk out these steps and go right up to the outside. So that's especially important in a residential area where you have children. You want to make sure they have a way to be able to get out of the pond. That's the overall scheme of the whole. The other thing we don't want to do is make it square. We would call that a swimming pool. So a pond has more of a natural contour and fits into the landscape. As you can see here, this renovation, we're working around the plants that you already had in place.
I think that's an important point. You don't have to tear everything out. A good designer could come in and work around the existing landscape.
Absolutely. If you recall, you used to have a waterfall over here. It was a little closer to the pond than this one is, so they moved it back a little bit. Now the other part that we talk about in terms of design of the pond is we want to have some sort of a current going across the pond. So we have a place over here where we're going to put a skimmer, and the skimmer is a home for the pump and a place to draw water into. We want to have a waterfall, some sort of waterfall weir or filter, and that lets the water come back into the pond. And then we have over here a stream with another waterfall, and that stream is going to force all debris over toward the skimmer. So everything works in this direction, and we do that in conjunction with Mother Nature. In Oklahoma, we have more west and southwesterly winds, so we want the wind to push trash over toward the skimmer. Otherwise, we're working against the wind, and it's not going to happen very well.
Right. That's a really interesting aspect of the design. Now with the waterfalls, there's another thing, not just moving the water, but the sound it creates. Tell me about that.
The water coming out of a waterfall has to fall in different ways in order for you to hear all of those different sounds. Water falling into water makes a really nice, pretty sound, as does water falling onto rock and water falling over rock. Those are all three different sounds, and if we didn't have those, our brain would block out the sound of the waterfall like it does the sound of your air conditioner in the house. After a while, you don't hear it anymore. And the reason you don't is because it's white noise to your brain. It blocks it out. We don't want your waterfall to do that. We want it to be a focal point of your pond so you get those different sounds and can enjoy them.
All right. Well, there's so many interesting and intricate elements that go into the design process. I can see certainly the benefit of working with a professional to make sure we get all these pieces set up correctly.
That's where the professional earns their money, because they're able to come in and they've built these before, and they can look at this, and our professionals really can look at these rocks and determine just about where it needs to set before they even put it in place. And that's a real skill that's developed over time. It's something anybody can learn, but they've got to do it for a while before they know how to do it well and make it look natural. That's the key. If you go out and study creeks and waterfalls out in nature, you're going to find they're all different, but they have some common points. They're going to have some rocks on the side that were too big to wash down.
Right.
They got pushed out to the side. You've got some smaller rocks that did tumble down, and then you've got even smaller rocks behind those. So they know where to put the rocks as they go around. One other important consideration when you think about the shelves and the size of all of this, normally people will come and say they want a pond and they want it to be this big. Well, that's water edge to water edge. Here we've got it a lot wider than what your pond is actually going to wind up, because we're going to come in and set a rock here and a rock here and a rock here. And those rocks are going to displace water and they're going to take up space. So you're going to dig the hole a little bigger than you think you want your pond, because you've got to allow for those rocks to have a place to be.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Okay.